I pulled up to my sister's $1 million home in Beverly Hills, driving a gleaming white Tesla Model S that cost me 3 months' salary to rent for just one weekend. The moment I stepped out, my sister Claire's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. "Maya, we don't have parking space for that thing. You'll have to find street parking." What she didn't know was that I'd maxed out my credit cards and borrowed against my 401k to afford this charade, all because I was tired of being treated like the family failure. So when they made it clear that even my desperate attempt at success wasn't welcome in their driveway, I decided it was time they learned what real success actually looks like. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Maya Rodriguez, and at 28, I thought I'd figured out how to earn my family's respect. I was wrong about everything. Growing up as the youngest of 3 daughters in a family obsessed with appearances and achievement, I'd always been the odd one out. While my older sisters Claire and Sophia pursued prestigious careers in law and medicine respectively, I'd chosen to become a social worker, earning a modest salary that barely covered my studio apartment in Koreatown and my student loan payments. Claire had married a tech executive and lived in a sprawling modern home with a 3-car garage and a wine cellar. Sophia was a successful dermatologist with her own practice, driving a BMW and wearing designer clothes to every family gathering. Then there was me, showing up to family events in my 10-year-old Honda Civic, wearing clothes from Target, and listening to them discuss investments and vacation homes, while I calculated whether I could afford to split the dinner check. The breaking point came 3 months ago during our father's 65th birthday celebration at an upscale restaurant in West Hollywood. I'd saved for weeks to afford the prix menu, only to watch my sisters casually order expensive wine and additional appetizers without consulting anyone about the bill. When it came time to pay, Claire had looked at me with that familiar mixture of pity and condescension that I'd grown to hate. "Don't worry about the wine, Maya," she'd said, her voice dripping with false generosity. "Sophia and I can cover the extras. We know things are tight for you right now." The way she emphasized "right now" made it clear she thought my financial struggles were temporary incompetence rather than the reality of working in social services. That night, I'd driven home in my Honda with its rattling air conditioner and peeling paint, feeling smaller and more insignificant than ever. I was tired of being the family charity case, tired of their patronizing smiles and their assumption that I'd chosen poverty over success. I wanted them to see me as someone who had made it, someone who deserved their respect and admiration. That's when I came up with the plan that would change everything, though not in the way I'd expected. For 3 months, I'd been secretly building a facade of success that I couldn't afford. It started small with a few designer pieces from outlet stores and a careful study of social media posts that would suggest a more affluent lifestyle. I'd learned to take photos in expensive hotel lobbies during my lunch breaks, careful to crop out anything that might reveal I was just visiting. I'd started wearing makeup that cost more than my grocery budget, and carrying a purse I'd bought on a payment plan that would take me 6 months to pay off. The car rental was supposed to be the final piece of my elaborate deception. Claire was hosting a family barbecue for Labor Day weekend, the first gathering at her new house since she and her husband had completed an extensive renovation. She'd been posting photos of the infinity pool and the outdoor kitchen on Instagram for months, each image a reminder of the gap between her success and my struggles. I'd convinced myself that if I showed up driving something impressive, wearing the right clothes, and projecting confidence and prosperity, my family would finally see me differently. They'd stop treating me like the poor relation and start including me in their conversations about real estate and investment strategies. Maybe Claire would stop making comments about my little apartment, and Sophia would quit offering to pay for my meals with that pitying expression. The Tesla rental had cost me $800 for the weekend, money I'd scraped together by maxing out 2 credit cards and taking a cash advance on a third. I'd justified it by telling myself this was an investment in my relationship with my family, that the respect I'd earn would be worth the financial stress. I'd even practiced conversations about my new car and prepared vague explanations about a promotion at work that would account for my sudden upgrade in lifestyle. What I hadn't anticipated was how the weight of the deception would feel as I drove through the winding streets of Beverly Hills that Friday evening. Every mile in the borrowed luxury felt like a lie I was telling myself as much as my family. The car's advanced features and smooth ride only emphasized how far removed it was from my actual life and financial reality. I'd spent the afternoon getting ready with the same attention to detail I'd applied to planning this entire charade. My hair had been professionally styled at a salon I couldn't afford, swept into an elegant updo that would photograph well. My dress was a designer piece I'd found at a consignment shop. Still expensive enough to stretch my budget, but authentic enough to pass inspection from sisters who knew quality when they saw it. My jewelry was borrowed from a coworker who thought I was attending a wedding, and my shoes were the result of 3 months of payment plans with a boutique that offered financing options. As I'd applied my makeup that evening, looking at myself in the mirror of my tiny bathroom, I'd felt a mixture of excitement and dread. This was my chance to finally be seen as successful, to join the family conversations instead of sitting on the sidelines, to prove that my career choice hadn't been a mistake that would keep me permanently behind my sisters in terms of achievement and respect. The drive to Beverly Hills had been surreal, sitting behind the wheel of a car that cost more than I made in a year, surrounded by technology and luxury that felt alien and uncomfortable despite its impressive design. I'd practiced my casual explanations about the car, rehearse stories about my work that would suggest career advancement without being specific enough to be fact-checked later. But as I'd navigated the familiar streets toward Claire's house, watching other expensive cars merge seamlessly into traffic around me, I'd started to feel like an imposter, in a way that went beyond just the borrowed luxury. I was about to lie to my family about who I was and what I could afford, all because I was desperate for their approval and acceptance. Claire's house sat on a hillside lot with a circular driveway that could easily accommodate multiple vehicles. The modern architecture and extensive landscaping screamed money in the understated way that only truly expensive homes could achieve. As I'd pulled up, I could see through the floor-to-ceiling windows into the living room where my parents and Sophia were already gathered, wine glasses in hand, looking completely at home in the designer furniture and curated artwork that filled the space. The moment I'd stepped out of the Tesla, adjusting my dress and checking my reflection in the car's tinted windows, I'd felt a surge of confidence that maybe this plan would actually work. The car looked impressive against the backdrop of Claire's perfectly manicured landscape, and I looked like someone who belonged in this setting, someone who could afford to drive something that expensive and wear clothes that cost more than most people's rent. That confidence lasted exactly 30 seconds. Until Claire appeared at the front door and delivered the blow that would unravel everything I'd planned and force me to confront the reality of what I'd been doing to myself and my relationships with my family. "Maya, we don't have parking space for that thing. You'll have to find street parking." The words hit me like ice water, not because of the inconvenience of having to park on the street, but because of what they revealed about how my sister viewed my presence at her home. The driveway was clearly large enough for my car, and I could see empty space next to her husband's Range Rover and her own Mercedes. The problem wasn't space. The problem was that she didn't want my rental car visible from her house, didn't want her neighbors to associate whatever impression my Tesla might make with her property and her family.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
I stood there for a moment, keys in my hand, feeling the weight of the lie I'd been living pressed down on me like a physical force. The car that was supposed to earn me respect had instead highlighted how little respect my family actually had for me. They'd rather I park blocks away and walk back than have my presence dilute the careful image they'd cultivated in their neighborhood. "Of course," I'd managed to say, my voice steady despite the emotions churning in my chest. "I'll find something down the street." As I'd gotten back into the Tesla to move it, I'd caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror and realized that no amount of expensive clothes or borrowed luxury was going to change how my family saw me. I wasn't the poor sister who'd finally made it. I was still the poor sister, now desperately pretending to be something I wasn't, and they could sense the desperation even if they couldn't identify its source. The drive around the neighborhood looking for parking had given me time to think about what I was actually doing and why. I was spending money I didn't have to impress people who apparently didn't want to be associated with my attempts at success. I was going into debt to play a role that felt increasingly uncomfortable and inauthentic, all for the approval of family members who seemed determined to keep me in the box they'd created for me years ago. When I'd finally found a parking spot 3 blocks away and walked back to Claire's house in my expensive shoes that were already starting to pinch my feet, I'd realized that this evening was going to be a test of more than just my ability to maintain a convincing lie about my financial situation. It was going to force me to confront the reality of my relationships with my family and decide whether their approval was worth the price I was paying to try to earn it. The party was already in full swing when I finally made it through Claire's front door, having spent 20 minutes walking back from my distant parking spot and trying to repair the damage the evening humidity had done to my carefully styled hair. The house was filled with my family, and what appeared to be several of Claire's neighbors and her husband's colleagues, all holding wine glasses and making conversation that sounded effortless and sophisticated. My mother spotted me first, her face lighting up with the kind of surprised pleasure I rarely saw directed toward me. "Maya, darling, you look absolutely stunning tonight. That dress is gorgeous." She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of her expensive perfume mixed with the wine she'd obviously been enjoying. "Thank you, Mom. You look beautiful, too." It wasn't a lie. My mother had always been elegant, with the kind of natural style that my sisters had inherited, and I'd always felt I was lacking. Tonight she was wearing a silk blouse and perfectly tailored pants that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her silver hair styled in a way that looked effortless but had probably required a professional stylist. "Come, let me introduce you to some of Claire's neighbors. The Hendersons just got back from a month in Italy, and Mrs. Chen has been asking about you since she heard you work in social services. She's very interested in hearing about your work with underprivileged families." As my mother led me through the crowd, I felt the familiar mixture of pride and discomfort that came with talking about my job. I was genuinely passionate about my work and proud of the difference I made in people's lives, but I also knew that in this crowd, social work was viewed as noble but impractical, admirable but not particularly impressive from a financial or status perspective. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a retired teacher who was genuinely interested in hearing about the challenges facing the families I worked with. Her questions were thoughtful and her attention felt authentic, not the polite but distracted interest I usually encountered when discussing my career at family gatherings. For a few minutes, I found myself relaxing into a conversation that felt genuine and meaningful, temporarily forgetting about the expensive facade I was maintaining and the debt I'd incurred to be here. "Your work sounds incredibly important," Mrs. Chen said after I described a recent case involving a single mother and her 3 children. "It must be so rewarding to see the difference you make in people's lives, even when the system makes it challenging." "It is," I agreed, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine I'd been sipping. "There are difficult days, but when you can help a family stabilize their housing situation or connect them with resources that change their trajectory, it makes everything worthwhile." "Maya has always been our family's humanitarian," my father's voice interrupted our conversation. He'd appeared beside us with that particular smile he wore when he was proud, but also slightly condescending. "She's got the biggest heart of all our girls, even if she hasn't quite figured out how to monetize her compassion yet." The comment landed like a small slap, delivered with enough affection to make objecting seem ungracious, but pointed enough to remind everyone present that my career choice was viewed as financially impractical by my family. Mrs. Chen's expression flickered with embarrassment on my behalf, and I felt my cheeks flush with a combination of anger and humiliation. "Social work is incredibly valuable work," Mrs. Chen said diplomatically, trying to smooth over the awkward moment my father had created. "We need more people willing to dedicate their careers to helping others." "Oh, absolutely," my father agreed quickly, realizing he'd overstepped. "We're very proud of Maya's dedication. I just worry about her financial future sometimes. Social workers don't exactly get paid what they're worth in this society." It was a perfectly reasonable concern wrapped in a public critique that highlighted my family's ongoing narrative about my life choices. I was the daughter who'd chosen helping people over helping herself. Admirable in theory but impractical in reality. The expensive dress I was wearing and the Tesla I'd rented suddenly felt like props in a play I was performing, to convince them, and maybe myself, that I could be both compassionate and successful. Sophia appeared at my elbow just as the conversation was reaching its most uncomfortable peak. Maya, Claire wants to show you the new kitchen. She's been dying to get your opinion on the renovation. It was clearly a rescue mission, and I was grateful for the intervention, even as I wondered what my family had been saying about me before I arrived. Claire's kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design and expensive appliances, the kind of space that belonged in architectural magazines and cooking shows. Every surface gleamed, from the quartz countertops to the professional-grade stainless steel range that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The island was larger than my entire kitchen, and the wine refrigerator was stocked with bottles that I recognized from restaurant menus as being well outside my price range. "This is incredible, Claire," I said, running my hand along the smooth countertop and genuinely impressed by the beauty and functionality of the space. "You and James must love cooking in here." "We do, though honestly, we end up eating out more often than we probably should," Claire laughed, refilling her wine glass from a bottle of Pinot Noir that I recognized as costing around $60. "It's almost too nice to use for everyday cooking. We keep talking about hiring a chef for dinner parties, but James thinks that's too pretentious." The casual mention of hiring a chef for entertainment struck me as the kind of problem I would never have the luxury of contemplating. My idea of a dinner party was ordering pizza for friends in my studio apartment, and the most expensive wine I'd ever purchased was a $15 bottle for a special occasion. "The appliances look amazing," I said, trying to keep the conversation focused on the renovation rather than their lifestyle. "Did you work with a designer, or did you plan the layout yourself?" "We hired a firm that specializes in luxury kitchens. They handle everything from the initial design to coordinating with contractors and managing the installation. It was expensive, but worth it to avoid the stress of trying to manage such a complex project ourselves." As Claire described the renovation process, casually mentioning costs that would have covered my living expenses for 2 years, I found myself wondering what it would feel like to have problems that could be solved by writing checks, rather than requiring careful budgeting and months of planning. The kitchen represented a level of financial freedom that felt as foreign to me as another country, beautiful but completely outside my realm of experience. "Maya, I've been meaning to ask," Claire said, switching topics in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Mom mentioned that you've been doing really well at work lately. Something about a promotion?" My stomach dropped as I realized my mother had apparently been embellishing or misinterpreting something I'd said during a recent phone conversation. I'd mentioned that my supervisor had complimented my work on a particularly challenging case, but I'd never claimed to be getting a promotion. Now I was faced with either disappointing Claire by correcting the misunderstanding, or continuing the deception by inventing a promotion that didn't exist. "Things have been going well," I said carefully, trying to find a middle ground that wasn't an outright lie. "I've been taking on some additional responsibilities, and my supervisor has been really supportive of my work." "That's wonderful. You deserve recognition for all the good work you do. And I noticed you drove something different tonight. Is that new?" The question I'd been both expecting and dreading. Claire's tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp with curiosity. She'd clearly noticed the Tesla despite my distant parking, and she wanted to understand how her sister, who complained about student loan payments, had suddenly acquired such an expensive vehicle. "I'm trying it out for a while," I said, which was technically true even if it was misleading about the nature of my relationship with the car. I wanted to see how I liked driving something electric before making a long-term commitment. Smart approach. James has been talking about getting a Tesla for months, but he wants to wait for the new model to come out next year. They're such impressive cars, though the price point is still pretty steep for most people. The comment felt pointed, another reminder that expensive cars were normal considerations for her family but should theoretically be outside my financial reach. I could feel the weight of the deception pressing down on me, the elaborate lie I was telling becoming more complicated with every casual question and observation. Sophia joined us in the kitchen, carrying a plate of appetizers that looked like they'd been catered by a high-end restaurant. "These are incredible, Claire. Where did you find this caterer?" "It's actually a new chef we discovered through the Hendersons. She does small events and dinner parties, and her presentation is just gorgeous. Not cheap, but worth it for special occasions." As my sisters discussed catering options and restaurant recommendations, I found myself listening to a conversation that highlighted the casual way they spent money on experiences and services that I couldn't afford to consider. They weren't bragging or trying to make me feel excluded, but their normal life included financial choices that were completely outside my reality. The evening continued with more of the same casual displays of wealth and comfort that characterized my family's social gatherings. Conversations about vacation plans to Europe and Asia, recommendations for investment advisors and private schools, discussions of home improvement projects that cost more than most people's annual salaries. I participated when I could, smiled and nodded when I couldn't, and felt increasingly uncomfortable with the role I was playing and the debt I was accumulating to maintain my place at the table. By the time dinner was served on Claire's patio overlooking the city lights, I was exhausted from maintaining my facade and increasingly aware of how unsustainable my approach to earning my family's respect had become. The food was delicious, the wine was expensive, and the company was pleasant, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was performing in a play rather than participating in a genuine family gathering. As I sat at the beautifully set table, making conversation with my parents and sisters and their friends, I kept thinking about the Tesla parked 3 blocks away and the credit card bills that would arrive next month as a reminder of this evening's performance. I'd wanted to prove that I could belong in their world, that I could be successful and sophisticated and worthy of their respect. Instead, I was discovering that trying to be someone I wasn't was more exhausting and expensive than I'd ever imagined. The real revelation came during dessert, when my father raised his wine glass for a toast that would force me to confront the reality of what I'd been doing and why. "I want to toast my 3 beautiful daughters," he said, his voice carrying the slight emotional weight that came after an evening of good wine and family time. "Claire, who has built such a beautiful home and life with James. Sophia, who continues to build her practice and help people feel confident and beautiful. And Maya, who reminds us every day that success isn't just about money but about making a difference in the world." The toast should have felt good, a recognition of my contributions and value to the family. Instead, it felt like a gentle but firm reminder that my role was to be the idealist while my sisters occupied the positions of real achievement and financial success. I was the daughter who cared about people, which was admirable but not quite the same as being the daughter who had figured out how to care about people and build wealth at the same time. As everyone raised their glasses and smiled at me with the kind of affectionate approval usually reserved for children who'd tried their best but hadn't quite succeeded, I realized that no amount of expensive clothing or borrowed luxury was going to change the fundamental way my family viewed my life choices. They loved me, but they also pitied me, and that pity was dressed up as admiration for my noble but impractical career path. The drive home that night, returning the Tesla to its designated drop-off location before taking a rideshare back to my apartment, gave me time to reflect on what the evening had revealed about my relationships with my family and my own priorities. I'd spent 3 months and gone into significant debt to prove that I could be successful in their terms, only to discover that they'd already decided I was successful in different terms that felt more like consolation prizes than genuine recognition. Sitting in the back of the rideshare car as we drove through the less affluent neighborhoods where I actually lived, I realized that my desire for my family's respect had led me to accumulate debt I couldn't afford and compromise my own values in ways that made me feel uncomfortable and inauthentic. The evening had been a performance, but it had also been a revelation about the cost of seeking approval from people who might not be capable of giving me the kind of recognition I was looking for. As I climbed the stairs to my studio apartment that night, my feet aching from expensive shoes and my head spinning from wine I couldn't afford, I knew that something fundamental had to change. I couldn't continue living beyond my means to impress people who seemed determined to keep me in a box marked well-meaning but financially unsuccessful. More importantly, I couldn't continue compromising my own sense of integrity and authenticity for the approval of family members who loved me but might not respect the choices I'd made about how to live my life. The bills that would arrive over the next few weeks would serve as a concrete reminder of the cost of trying to be someone I wasn't, but the real cost had been the realization that I'd been willing to go into debt and lie to my family because I'd internalized their message that my career and my values weren't enough to earn their genuine respect and inclusion. The credit card statements arrived like a series of small explosions over the next 2 weeks, each one a stark reminder of the financial hole I'd dug for myself in pursuit of one evening's worth of family approval. The Tesla rental had been just the beginning. When I added up the designer dress, the professional styling, the expensive shoes, and the various other elements of my carefully constructed facade, the total came to nearly $4,000 that I didn't have. I sat at my tiny kitchen table on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to figure out how I was going to manage the minimum payments on credit cards that were now maxed out. My rent was due in 10 days, my student loan payment was automatically scheduled to withdraw in 2 weeks, and my checking account contained exactly $347. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to prove I was financially successful, I'd created the kind of financial crisis that would actually set me back months, if not years, in terms of building real stability and security. The evening that was supposed to demonstrate my prosperity had instead pushed me closer to the kind of financial desperation I'd been trying to escape my entire adult life. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire that made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Maya, had such a lovely time seeing you Saturday. You looked absolutely radiant. Mom and Dad can't stop talking about how well you're doing. We should get together for lunch soon to celebrate your success." Success. The word felt like a mockery when I was sitting in my studio apartment calculating whether I could afford to buy groceries this week or if I'd need to survive on whatever was left in my pantry. My family's perception of my newfound prosperity was based entirely on a performance I couldn't afford to maintain, and now they wanted to celebrate achievements that existed only in their imagination. I spent the morning researching debt consolidation options and side jobs I could take on to supplement my income, but the math was unforgiving. Even if I picked up freelance work in the evenings and weekends, it would take months to dig out of the hole I'd created, and that was assuming no unexpected expenses or emergencies arose during that time. The real wake-up call came when I tried to use my debit card to buy coffee on my way to work, and had it decline due to insufficient funds. I'd forgotten about a small automatic subscription that had processed overnight, dropping my account balance below the cost of a $4 latte. Standing in line at the coffee shop where I'd been a regular customer for 2 years, fumbling through my wallet for cash while other customers waited behind me, I felt a humiliation that cut deeper than anything my family had ever said about my financial situation. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I was going to tell my supervisor about my financial situation and ask about opportunities for additional hours or responsibilities that might come with increased compensation. It meant admitting that my current salary wasn't sufficient for my needs, but it also meant taking concrete action to address my problems rather than continuing to pretend they didn't exist. Jennifer Martinez had been my supervisor for 3 years, and she'd always been supportive of my work and understanding about the challenges facing social workers in terms of compensation and workload. When I knocked on her office door that afternoon, she welcomed me in with the warm smile that had made her such an effective leader for our department. "Maya, what can I do for you? You look like you have something important on your mind." I'd rehearsed this conversation during my lunch break, but sitting across from Jennifer's desk, I found myself struggling to find the right words to explain my situation without revealing the full extent of my poor decision-making over the past few months. I wanted to talk to you about my career development and whether there might be opportunities for me to take on additional responsibilities or hours. I'm looking to increase my income and expand my skills, and I'd prefer to do that within the organization if possible. Jennifer leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "I'm glad you brought this up, Maya. I've been impressed with your work lately, particularly your handling of the Thompson family case and your collaboration with the Housing Assistance Program. Are you thinking about supervisory roles, or are you more interested in direct service expansion? I'm open to exploring different options. I know there are budget constraints, but I'm willing to take on whatever additional work might be available. Actually, there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you. We're launching a new pilot program next month focused on financial literacy education for our client families. It would involve developing curriculum, conducting workshops, and coordinating with community partners. The position would come with a modest salary increase and would be excellent experience if you're interested in program development." The irony of being offered a job teaching financial literacy while I was drowning in credit card debt was so profound that I almost laughed out loud. Here I was, someone who'd made spectacularly poor financial decisions in recent months, being asked to help other people manage their money more effectively. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What would the timeline look like, and what kind of qualifications are you looking for?" We'd want someone to start within the next month, and honestly, you're my first choice for the position. Your educational background is strong, you have excellent communication skills, and you understand the challenges our families face in terms of financial stability. The salary increase would be about $8,000 annually, which I know isn't dramatic, but it's the best we can do within our current budget constraints. $8,000 annually worked out to roughly $650 more per month before taxes, which would be a significant help with my current debt situation, even if it wouldn't solve all my problems immediately. More importantly, it represented exactly the kind of career advancement I'd been hoping for, the recognition of my skills and potential that I'd been seeking from my family. I'm very interested, I said. What would be the next steps in terms of application or interview process? Honestly, if you want the position, it's yours. I've been watching your work for months, and I think you'd be perfect for this role. We could make the transition official next week if you're ready. As I walked back to my desk that afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of emotions about this unexpected opportunity. On one hand, it represented exactly the kind of professional growth and financial improvement I needed. On the other hand, it highlighted how I'd been seeking validation and advancement in all the wrong places, trying to impress my family with borrowed luxury instead of focusing on building real success through my work and career development. That evening, I called my mother to share the news about my promotion, partly because I was genuinely excited about the opportunity, and partly because I wanted to begin correcting the false impression I'd created about my recent success. Maya, darling, that's wonderful news, my mother said, her voice warm with genuine pride. A program coordinator position sounds like exactly the kind of leadership role you've been working toward. Your father and I are so proud of how you're advancing in your career. Thank you, Mom. I'm really excited about it. It's a chance to develop new skills and help families in a different way. And the salary increase will be nice too, I'm sure. You've been working so hard, and it's good to see that effort being recognized and rewarded. I hesitated, knowing that this was an opportunity to begin addressing the misconceptions about my financial situation, without admitting to the full extent of my recent deception. The increase is modest, but every bit helps when you're working in social services. I'm learning to be more strategic about my career development, instead of just hoping things will improve on their own. That's very mature thinking, Maya. Your sisters could probably learn something from your approach to building a career around your values, instead of just chasing money. It was an unexpected perspective from my mother, who had always seemed to celebrate Claire and Sophia's financial achievements more enthusiastically than my career choices. Hearing her suggest that my approach might have advantages that my sisters lacked made me wonder if I'd been misreading some of the family dynamics that had driven my desperate attempt to appear more successful. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, I said carefully, about the balance between doing work that matters and building financial security. I think I've been too focused on one side of that equation. Well, it sounds like this new position will help you address both sides. I can't wait to hear more about the program when you get started. After we hung up, I realized that my mother's response to my actual career advancement had been more enthusiastic and genuine than her reaction to my expensive dress and mysterious car at Claire's party. She seemed more impressed by my professional growth than she had been by my borrowed symbols of success, which made me wonder whether I'd been chasing the wrong kind of recognition all along. Over the next few days, I threw myself into preparing for my new role, researching financial literacy programs, and developing ideas for curriculum that would be relevant and accessible to the families we served. The work felt energizing in a way that my deceptive evening at Claire's house had not. I was using my skills and knowledge to build something meaningful, rather than using borrowed money to create an illusion of success. But the financial pressure from my credit card debt continued to weigh on me, a constant reminder of the consequences of my poor decision-making. I'd started picking up evening hours at a local nonprofit that needed help with grant writing, work that paid modestly but would help me chip away at my debt over time. My days became longer and more exhausting, but they also felt more purposeful than they had in months. The real test of my new perspective came 2 weeks later when Sophia called to invite me to join her and Claire for a spa weekend in Napa Valley. It was the kind of sisterly bonding experience I'd always wanted to be included in, the type of expensive leisure activity that had previously been beyond my reach, and that they typically enjoyed without extending invitations to me. Maya, we were thinking it would be fun to do a girls' weekend together, Sophia said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. There's this amazing resort in Napa that Claire found, and we thought it might be nice to celebrate your recent success with some sister time. My success. They were still operating under the impression that I'd recently experienced some kind of financial breakthrough, and they wanted to celebrate with an expensive weekend that I absolutely could not afford, especially given my current debt situation. That sounds wonderful, I said, stalling for time while I tried to figure out how to handle the situation. What kind of time frame were you thinking? Next weekend would be perfect. The resort has a special package that includes accommodations, spa treatments, and meals. It's about $600 per person, which I know isn't cheap, but we thought it would be worth it for a special celebration. $600 that I didn't have for a weekend celebrating success that didn't exist. The old me might have found a way to make it work, adding more debt to maintain the facade I'd created. But sitting in my apartment, surrounded by bills and payment plans, I realized that continuing down that path would only make my situation worse and delay the moment when I'd have to confront the reality of my finances. Sophia, I appreciate the invitation so much, and I love that you and Claire want to celebrate with me. But I need to be honest about something. My financial situation isn't quite what it might have seemed at Claire's party. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear the confusion in my sister's voice when she responded. What do you mean? You seem to be doing really well. The car, the clothes. You looked so put together and successful. I was putting on a bit of a show that night, I admitted, feeling my cheeks burn with embarrassment even though she couldn't see me. I wanted you and Claire and Mom and Dad to see me as successful, so I spent money I didn't really have on clothes and car rental to create that impression. It was stupid and financially irresponsible, and now I'm dealing with the consequences. Maya, why would you do that? We've never cared about what you drive or what you wear. We love you regardless of your financial situation. It was exactly what I'd hoped to hear, but also exactly what made my deception feel even more foolish and unnecessary. I'd gone into debt to impress people who claimed they didn't need to be impressed, to earn approval from family members who insisted they already approved of me. I know that intellectually, I said. But I've always felt like the poor sister, like I was being pitied or patronized because I chose a career that doesn't pay well. I wanted to prove that I could be successful in the same ways you and Claire are successful. Oh, Maya, I had no idea you felt that way. I mean, yes, Claire and I make more money than you do, but we've always admired your work and your dedication to helping people. Money isn't the only measure of success. I'm starting to understand that, but it took making some really poor financial decisions to get there. So as much as I'd love to join you for a spa weekend, I need to focus on getting my finances back in order rather than continuing to spend money I don't have. What if Claire and I covered your portion? We could call it a belated birthday gift, or just a sister treat. We really want you there, and money shouldn't be the barrier. The offer was generous and well-intentioned, but it represented exactly the kind of financial dependence on my family that I'd been trying to avoid. Accepting their charity would put me back in the position of being the sister who needed help, the one who couldn't afford to participate in family activities without assistance. That's incredibly sweet of you, but I think I need to pass this time. I'm trying to be more responsible about my spending and more honest about what I can and can't afford. I understand, and I respect that. But Maya, I hope you know that we don't judge you for making less money than we do. Your work is important and meaningful, and we've always been proud of what you do. After we hung up, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness about declining the spa weekend. Relief because I'd been honest about my financial situation and avoided adding more debt to my already precarious budget. Sadness because I was missing out on time with my sisters, and because I'd created a situation where my poor financial decisions were now limiting my ability to participate in family activities. But I also felt something else that I hadn't expected. Pride in my decision to be honest about my limitations rather than continuing to fake prosperity I couldn't maintain. It was the first time in months that I'd made a financial decision based on my actual situation rather than my desired image, and it felt like a small but significant step toward rebuilding my relationship with money and with my family. The conversation with Sophia had revealed something important about my family's attitude toward my career and financial situation. While I'd been assuming they pitied me or looked down on my choices, she'd expressed genuine admiration for my work and seemed surprised that I felt judged or patronized. It made me wonder whether some of the condescension I'd perceived had been my own insecurity rather than their actual attitudes. Over the next few weeks, I continued to adjust to my new role as program coordinator while working evening hours to address my debt situation. The financial literacy curriculum I was developing forced me to confront my own money management mistakes in a way that was both humbling and educational. I was learning about budgeting strategies and debt reduction techniques that I wished I'd understood before making my expensive attempt to impress my family. The program launched 6 weeks later with a group of 12 families who were working to improve their financial stability as part of their overall case management plans. Teaching them about the importance of living within their means and avoiding unnecessary debt felt deeply ironic given my recent experiences, but it also felt like an opportunity to learn alongside them and apply the principles I was teaching to my own financial recovery. One of the families in the program was particularly memorable. A single mother named Carmen who was working 2 jobs while attending nursing school and raising 3 children. Despite her challenging circumstances, she approached the financial literacy workshops with enthusiasm and determination, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions about budgeting strategies and debt management. During our 3rd session, Carmen stayed after the other participants had left to ask for additional guidance about a financial decision she was facing. Her oldest daughter had been accepted to a private high school with an excellent academic program, but the tuition would require Carmen to take on significant debt that would delay her own educational goals. "I want to give her every opportunity," Carmen said, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision. "But I'm worried that if I take on that debt now, it will set us back financially in ways that might hurt the whole family long term." As I listened to Carmen wrestle with the balance between her daughter's opportunities and her family's financial stability, I was struck by the parallels to my own recent decision-making. Like me, she was tempted to take on debt for something that felt important and worthwhile. Unlike me, she was carefully considering the long-term consequences and seeking advice before making a choice that could impact her family's financial future. "What do you think would happen if your daughter attended the public high school instead?" I asked, trying to help her think through all the alternatives. "She'd still get a good education, and there are advanced placement classes available. It's not that the public school is bad, it's just that the private school has better resources and smaller class sizes." "And what would happen to your nursing program if you took on the additional debt for her tuition?" Carmen sighed, already knowing the answer. "I'd probably have to extend my program by a semester or maybe take a break entirely to work more hours. The debt payments would make it harder to cover our basic expenses on my current income." As we talked through the pros and cons of each option, I found myself sharing some of my own recent experiences with debt and the consequences of prioritizing image over financial stability. Without going into specific details, I was able to offer perspective from someone who had learned hard lessons about the cost of borrowing money for non-essential expenses. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our families is to make financially responsible decisions, even when it means saying no to things we'd like to provide, I said. "Your daughter will benefit more from having a mother who completes nursing school and achieves financial stability than she would from attending a private high school that puts the whole family at financial risk." Carmen nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. I think I was getting caught up in wanting to give her the best of everything, instead of thinking about what's truly best for our family overall." Our conversation reminded me of my own tendency to make financial decisions based on emotions and desires rather than practical considerations and long-term consequences. I'd wanted to give my family the impression that I was successful, so I'd borrowed money to create that impression without thinking about the impact on my actual financial stability and future opportunities. As Carmen left that day, having decided to enroll her daughter in the excellent public high school while continuing her own nursing program, I realized that I'd learned as much from our conversation as she had. Teaching financial literacy was forcing me to confront my own money management mistakes and develop better strategies for making decisions based on my actual resources rather than my desires or insecurities. The progress I was making in paying down my debt was slow but steady. The combination of my salary increase and evening freelance work was allowing me to make more than minimum payments on my credit cards, and I'd developed a detailed budget that accounted for every dollar of income and expense. It wasn't exciting or glamorous, but it was honest and sustainable in a way that my previous approach to money had not been. 3 months after my disastrous evening at Claire's house, I reached a milestone that felt more significant than any designer dress or luxury car rental ever had. I'd paid off the smallest of my 3 credit cards entirely. The balance had been only $800, but eliminating it completely felt like a victory that represented real progress rather than borrowed success. That same week, I received a text from Claire that made me realize how much my perspective on family relationships had evolved since my expensive attempt to earn their approval. Maya, I've been thinking about our conversation after my party, and I owe you an apology. I realized that when I told you to park on the street, it probably came across as dismissive or unwelcoming. I was worried about our neighbors seeing unfamiliar cars in the driveway because we've had issues with people parking there for parties at other houses. But I should have explained that instead of just telling you to move. I hope you didn't feel like I was treating you badly. Reading her message, I realized that I'd interpreted her request to park on the street as a judgment about my worthiness to be associated with her home, when it had actually been about a practical concern that had nothing to do with me personally. My own insecurity about my financial situation had caused me to read rejection and condescension into a simple logistical request. I texted back, "Thank you for explaining that." I think I was feeling insecure about a lot of things that night, and I probably overreacted to something that wasn't intended as a slight. I appreciate you reaching out. Her response came quickly. I love you, Maya, and I'm proud of the work you do and the person you are. I hope you know that has nothing to do with what you drive or what you wear. It was exactly what I'd needed to hear months earlier, but I realize now that even if she'd said it then, I might not have been ready to believe it. My own insecurity and my preoccupation with appearing successful had made it difficult for me to accept that my family valued me for reasons that had nothing to do with money or status symbols. As I continued working on my debt reduction plan and settling into my new role as program coordinator, I found myself developing a different relationship with both money and family approval. Instead of viewing financial success as something I needed to perform or prove, I was learning to see it as a skill set that required practice and patience to develop. The families in my financial literacy program were teaching me as much as I was teaching them about the difference between appearing prosperous and building actual financial stability. They were facing real challenges with limited resources, but they were also making genuine progress by focusing on practical strategies rather than trying to maintain appearances they couldn't afford. 6 months after my expensive evening at Claire's house, I achieved another milestone that felt genuinely worth celebrating. I'd been offered a permanent promotion to program manager with a salary increase that would put me in a significantly better financial position. The promotion came with additional responsibilities and the opportunity to expand the financial literacy program to serve more families throughout our region. When I called my parents to share the news, their enthusiasm felt different from the polite pride they'd expressed about my previous work. They seemed to understand that this promotion represented real career advancement and increased earning potential, not just noble but impractical dedication to helping people. Maya, this is wonderful news, my father said, his voice warm with genuine excitement. Program manager is a significant leadership position, and it sounds like you're really building something important with this financial literacy work. Thank you, Dad. It feels good to be recognized for the work I've been doing, and the salary increase will make a real difference in my financial situation. We're proud of you for building your career strategically while staying true to your values, my mother added. It's not easy to find that balance, but you seem to be figuring it out. Their response felt fundamentally different from the patronizing praise I'd received in the past, when they'd celebrated my good intentions while seeming to pity my financial struggles. This time, they were acknowledging both my professional growth and my improved financial situation, treating me as an adult who is successfully managing her career rather than a well-meaning but impractical idealist. As I hung up the phone that day, I realized that I'd finally achieved something I'd been seeking for years: my family's genuine respect for my career choices and my financial management. But I'd earned it through actual accomplishment and responsible decision-making rather than through expensive performances and borrowed luxury. The expensive evening that had pushed me into debt had ultimately taught me more about success and family relationships than any amount of borrowed prestige could have. I'd learned that respect can't be purchased or performed, that financial stability requires honest assessment of resources rather than wishful thinking, and that my family's love for me had never been contingent on my ability to afford the same lifestyle they enjoyed. Most importantly, I'd discovered that real success, felt completely different from performed success. The satisfaction of paying off debt, earning a promotion through hard work, and building genuine financial stability was deeper and more lasting than the temporary rush of appearing prosperous through expensive purchases I couldn't afford. As I prepared to take on my new role and continue building my career, I felt grateful for the expensive lesson that had forced me to confront my relationship with money and family approval. The debt I'd incurred had been painful and stressful, but it had also been the catalyst for developing a more mature and sustainable approach to both financial management and family relationships. Looking back on that evening at Claire's house, I could see it as the moment when I'd stopped trying to be someone I wasn't and started focusing on becoming someone I could respect. And that transformation, I was beginning to understand, was worth more than any luxury car or designer dress could ever be. 1 year after the Tesla rental debacle, I received an invitation that would test everything I'd learned about family, money, and authentic success. Claire was throwing a housewarming party for Sophia, who had just purchased her first home, a beautiful Spanish-style house in Silver Lake, with original hardwood floors and a garden that was already being featured on her Instagram feed. The invitation came via text, casual and warm in a way that felt different from the formal politeness that had characterized our family communications in recent years. Maya, Sophia's housewarming is next Saturday at 3. Really hope you can make it. She's so excited to show everyone the house, and it wouldn't be the same without you there. As I read Claire's message while sitting in my newly organized living space, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in how far I'd come financially and professionally over the past year. Nervousness about how I'd handle being around my family's wealth, without feeling compelled to compete or pretend. And genuine excitement about celebrating Sophia's achievement without the undercurrent of envy and inadequacy that had poisoned so many previous family gatherings. My studio apartment looked completely different from the cluttered, bill-covered space it had been a year ago. I'd gradually furnished it with pieces from thrift stores and estate sales, creating a cozy environment that reflected my actual taste and budget rather than trying to imitate my sister's expensive minimalism. The small dining table where I'd once spread out credit card statements in despair now held books about financial planning and a laptop where I worked on grant proposals for expanded programming at the community center. Most importantly, my relationship with money had fundamentally changed. Instead of viewing it as a tool for purchasing approval or competing with my family, I'd learned to see it as a resource that required careful management and strategic thinking. I had a detailed budget that I actually followed, an emergency fund that covered 3 months of expenses, and credit cards that I paid off in full every month. The financial literacy program I'd developed had grown beyond anything we'd initially imagined. What had started as workshops for 12 families had expanded into a comprehensive community resource serving over 200 people annually. The success of the program had led to additional funding from local foundations and recognition from the mayor's office as an innovative approach to addressing economic inequality. My role had evolved along with the program. I was now the Director of Financial Empowerment Initiatives, overseeing a team of 4 staff members and managing partnerships with banks, credit unions, and other community organizations. The salary that came with my new position was modest by my family's standards but comfortable by mine, allowing me to save for long-term goals while still enjoying life within my means. More than the professional advancement, though, I'd gained something I'd been seeking for years without realizing it. Confidence in my own worth that wasn't dependent on external validation or material possessions. I knew the value of the work I was doing, the impact it was having on families in our community, and the skills I developed in program management and financial education. That knowledge felt more solid and lasting than any designer dress or luxury car ever could. The morning of Sophia's housewarming, I chose my outfit with the same careful consideration I'd once applied to hiding my financial struggles, but for completely different reasons. I selected a vintage silk blouse I'd found at an estate sale and tailored to fit perfectly, paired with well-made pants I'd purchased on sale 6 months earlier. The outfit was stylish and appropriate without being expensive or pretentious, and it reflected the aesthetic I'd developed since learning to shop thoughtfully rather than impulsively. I drove to Silver Lake in my Honda Civic, which I'd finally had properly serviced and detailed after months of putting off maintenance due to financial constraints. The car wasn't impressive by my family's standards, but it was reliable, paid for, and perfectly adequate for my needs. More importantly, I felt no shame or anxiety about arriving in it, no compulsion to apologize for or explain my transportation choices. Sophia's new house was genuinely beautiful, a 1920s Spanish revival with arched doorways, decorative tile work, and mature fruit trees in the backyard. As I walked up the front path, admiring the restored original features and thoughtful landscaping, I felt pure happiness for my sister's achievement without the bitter undertone of comparison that had characterized my response to my family's successes in the past. The party was already in full swing when I arrived, with family members and friends scattered throughout the house and garden, wine glasses in hand, admiring Sophia's decorating choices and asking about her renovation plans. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, filled with genuine enthusiasm for Sophia's accomplishment and the beautiful space she'd created. My mother spotted me first, embracing me with the kind of uncomplicated affection that had become more common in our relationship since I'd stopped trying to impress her with borrowed luxury. "Maya, darling, you look wonderful. Sophia is so excited that you're here. She's been talking about showing you the herb garden she planted. I can't wait to see it. The house is absolutely gorgeous. She must be so proud." She is, and she should be. It took her months to find exactly the right place, and she's put so much thought into making it her own. Come, let me show you around before it gets too crowded. As my mother led me through the house, pointing out original architectural details and Sophia's decorating choices, I was struck by how much more comfortable I felt in my family's company than I had in years. There was no pretense in my interactions, no performance anxiety about maintaining an image I couldn't afford, no underlying resentment about being treated as the poor relation. The change wasn't just in my attitude, though. My family seemed to interact with me differently as well, treating me as an equal participant in conversations about career goals and life plans, rather than as someone who needed gentle encouragement and financial assistance. They asked thoughtful questions about my work and seemed genuinely interested in the challenges and successes of running community programs. In the kitchen, I found Sophia arranging appetizers on vintage serving platters she'd collected from antique shops throughout the city. She looked up when I entered, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing me. "Maya, I'm so glad you made it. What do you think of the house?" "It's absolutely perfect for you. I love how you've preserved the original character while making it completely livable and modern. The kitchen renovation is stunning." "Thank you. It was a lot of work, but it's exactly what I'd always imagined for my first house. I wanted something with history and personality, not just a sterile modern box." As we talked about her renovation choices and future plans for the garden, I realized that my appreciation for her achievement felt completely genuine and unconflicted. I wasn't calculating the cost of her down payment or comparing her purchasing power to my rental situation. I was simply happy that my sister had found a beautiful home that reflected her taste and personality. "I heard about your promotion to director," Sophia said as she opened a bottle of wine. "Mom and Dad are so proud of how you've built that program from nothing into something that's getting regional recognition. It's been incredibly rewarding work. I love seeing families develop confidence with their finances and achieve goals they didn't think were possible. It sounds like you're helping people in exactly the way you'd always hoped to. And from what I understand, the position comes with real leadership responsibilities and a significant salary increase." The way she framed my career advancement felt fundamentally different from previous family discussions about my work. Instead of praising my noble intentions while pitying my financial situation, she was acknowledging both the impact of my work and the professional growth it represented. I was being treated as someone who had successfully built a career rather than someone who had chosen idealism over practical success. "The salary increase has made a huge difference in my financial stability," I said honestly. "I'm finally able to save for long-term goals while still doing work that feels meaningful and important. That's the perfect combination. I think sometimes people assume you have to choose between doing good and doing well financially, but you've proven that's not true." Her observation highlighted something I'd learned over the past year about the relationship between values and financial success. I'd once believed that caring about money was somehow incompatible with caring about people, that financial ambition would corrupt my dedication to social justice. But managing the budget for my program had taught me that money was simply a tool that could be used to create positive change when handled responsibly and strategically. Claire joined us in the kitchen, carrying empty wine glasses and wearing the kind of relaxed smile that suggested she was enjoying the party as much as the guests were. "Are you two talking about Maya's program? I saw the article in the Times about the expansion funding. It sounded like the mayor was really impressed with the results you've been achieving." The article she was referring to had been a small piece in the local section about community programs receiving foundation grants, but the fact that she'd noticed and remembered it touched me more than she probably realized. For years, I'd felt like my family paid polite attention to my work without really understanding or valuing what I was doing. Now they seemed to follow my career developments with genuine interest and pride. The expansion funding is going to let us serve 3 additional neighborhoods and offer more comprehensive services, I explained. We're adding homeownership counseling and small business development support to the financial literacy workshops. That's incredible growth in just 2 years, Claire said. You must have some serious grant writing and program management skills to scale up that quickly. Her recognition of the professional skills required to build and manage community programs felt like validation I'd been seeking for years. I'd always known that my work required complex project management, relationship building, and strategic thinking, but my family had seemed to view it as purely heart-driven, rather than requiring intellectual and professional capabilities. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself relaxing into conversations with relatives and family friends who had previously made me feel defensive about my career choices and financial situation. Without the anxiety of maintaining a fake image of prosperity, I could engage authentically with their questions about my work and my life, sharing genuine enthusiasm for my achievements without feeling compelled to exaggerate or compete. The conversation that most clearly illustrated how much had changed happened during dessert, when my father's brother Robert asked about my 5-year plan, in the tone he typically used when interrogating younger family members about their career ambitions and financial goals. "Maya, your father tells me you've been promoted to director of some kind of community program. What are your long-term goals in that field? Are you thinking about moving into more lucrative areas of nonprofit management, or maybe transitioning to the private sector?" In the past, Uncle Robert's questions had always made me feel defensive and inadequate, like I needed to justify my career choices to someone who viewed success purely in terms of salary and prestige. This time, I felt confident enough in my achievements and direction to answer honestly without feeling judged. "I'm really passionate about expanding financial empowerment programming throughout the region," I said. "There's huge demand for these services, and I think we're just beginning to understand how effective community-based financial education can be in addressing economic inequality." "That sounds admirable, but what about your own financial future? Are you able to build wealth and plan for retirement on a nonprofit salary?" "Actually, yes. The program's success has led to significant salary increases, and I've learned to manage my money much more strategically over the past few years. I'm contributing to retirement accounts, building an emergency fund, and even starting to consider homeownership in the next few years." Uncle Robert's eyebrows rose with what appeared to be genuine surprise. "Really? That's impressive. I have to admit, I've always worried that working in social services would leave you financially insecure long-term. I understand that concern, and honestly, it was valid when I was younger and less strategic about my career development. But I've learned that you can build financial security while doing work that has social impact. It just requires being intentional about skill development and career advancement. Well, it sounds like you've figured that out. Your program must be quite successful to support that kind of salary growth." As Uncle Robert moved on to interrogate other family members about their career plans, I realized that I'd just had the kind of conversation I'd dreamed about for years. He'd asked challenging questions about my financial future, and I'd been able to respond with confidence and specific achievements rather than defensive platitudes about the importance of helping people. More importantly, I'd answered his questions honestly, without exaggerating my salary or prospects, but also without minimizing the real success I'd achieved in building both professional recognition and financial stability through my work. Later in the afternoon, as the party was winding down and guests were beginning to leave, I found myself in Sophia's garden with my 2 sisters, helping to clean up wine glasses and dessert plates while discussing our various life plans and family updates. Maya, I've been meaning to ask, Sophia said as she rinsed glasses in the outdoor sink she had installed near her herb garden. Are you still in that studio apartment in Koreatown, or have you started looking for something bigger? I'm actually starting to look at one-bedroom places in the area. The studio has been perfect while I was getting my finances in order, but I'm ready for a little more space now that I can afford it. That's exciting. Are you thinking about buying or renting? Probably renting for now, but I'm starting to research the home buying process for maybe 2 or 3 years down the line. I want to make sure I have a solid down payment and understand all the costs involved before I make that kind of commitment. Claire looked up from the serving tray she was organizing with obvious approval. That's such a smart approach. James and I bought our first place too quickly and ended up house poor for the first few years. Taking time to save properly and understand the market is much wiser. Her comments surprised me because I'd always assumed that Claire and her husband had achieved their current lifestyle through effortless financial success, rather than through the kind of careful planning and occasional mistakes that characterized most people's financial journeys. Really? You and James seem to have always been so financially secure and strategic about your investments and property purchases. We've gotten better at it over time, but we definitely made some expensive mistakes early on. We bought a condo we couldn't really afford because we were trying to keep up with friends who had family money, and it took years to recover from that decision. Sophia nodded in agreement. I think everyone our age has stories about financial mistakes they made, trying to appear more successful than they actually were. I spent way too much on clothes and restaurants in my 20s, because I thought that's what successful doctors were supposed to do. Listening to my sisters acknowledge their own financial learning curves and mistakes made me realize that I'd been comparing my internal experience of financial struggle to their external appearance of success, assuming that they'd never experienced the kind of money anxiety and poor decision-making that had characterized my recent years. I definitely made some spectacular financial mistakes recently, I said, feeling comfortable enough to share some of my experiences without going into embarrassing detail. I went through a phase where I was spending money I didn't have to try to keep up with a lifestyle I couldn't afford. It took getting into real financial trouble to learn the difference between appearing successful and actually building financial stability. What helped you turn it around? Claire asked, her question sounding genuinely interested rather than patronizing. Honestly, it was having to teach financial literacy to other people. You can't help families develop budgeting skills and debt reduction strategies when you're making poor financial decisions yourself. I had to learn the material well enough to teach it, and that forced me to apply it to my own situation. That's fascinating. So your work actually helped you develop better money management skills? Completely. I learned more about personal finance in 6 months of developing that curriculum than I had in the previous 10 years of just trying to figure it out on my own. As we finished cleaning up and prepared to leave, Sophia pulled me aside for a private conversation that felt like the culmination of the changes that had occurred in our family relationships over the past year. Maya, I wanted to tell you how much I admire what you've accomplished with your career and your financial situation. I know it wasn't easy to build that program from nothing, and I'm impressed by how strategic you've been about advancing your career while staying true to your values. Thank you, Sophia. That means a lot, coming from you. I also wanted to apologize if Claire and I ever made you feel like your career choices weren't valued or respected by our family. Looking back, I think we sometimes talked about money and success in ways that were insensitive to the different path you'd chosen. Her apology touched me deeply because it acknowledged something I'd felt for years but had never been able to articulate clearly. I had felt judged and patronized by my family's attitude toward my career, but I'd also been too insecure about my own choices to address it directly or advocate for myself effectively. I appreciate you saying that. I think I was also dealing with my own insecurities about money and success, which made me interpret some comments as more judgmental than they were probably intended to be. Maybe, but I think we could have been more sensitive to the fact that you were building a career in a field that doesn't offer the same immediate financial rewards as law or medicine. What you've accomplished is actually more impressive because you've had to be more creative and strategic about creating opportunities. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how fundamentally different the afternoon had been from family gatherings in recent years. I'd enjoyed my sister's company without feeling envious of their achievements or defensive about my own choices. I had participated in conversations about money and career planning without anxiety about being judged or pitied. Most importantly, I'd felt valued and respected for who I actually was, rather than struggling to maintain a performance of who I thought my family wanted me to be. The expensive Tesla rental that had seemed so important a year ago now felt like a distant memory, a symbol of how much my understanding of success and family relationships had evolved. I'd learned that respect couldn't be purchased with borrowed luxury, that authentic connection required honesty rather than performance, and that real achievement felt completely different from performed achievement. 6 months later, I reached a milestone that felt more significant than any designer dress or luxury car could ever be. I signed a lease on a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in Los Feliz, with hardwood floors, a small balcony, and enough space for a proper dining table where I could host dinner parties for friends and colleagues. The apartment was within my budget, reflected my actual taste rather than an image I was trying to project, and represented genuine progress in my financial and personal life. The day I moved into my new place, both Claire and Sophia came to help, bringing coffee and pastries for the moving crew, and staying to help me arrange furniture and hang pictures on the walls. As we worked together to make the space feel like home, I realized that this was the kind of family support I'd always wanted: practical help and genuine companionship without any undertone of charity or condescension. "Maya, this place is perfect for you," Claire said as we stood in the living room admiring how the afternoon light streamed through the large windows. "It has so much character, and the neighborhood is going to be great for walking and exploring." "I love that you'll have space to entertain now," Sophia added. "You'll have to have us over for dinner once you're settled." The invitation felt natural and reciprocal in a way that highlighted how much our family dynamics had shifted. Instead of being the sister who was always hosted by others due to space and financial constraints, I was now in a position to offer hospitality and share my home with family and friends. 3 years after the Tesla rental incident, I achieved something that would have seemed impossible during my lowest financial moments. I was offered a position as Regional Director of Financial Empowerment Programs, overseeing initiatives across 3 counties and managing a budget of over $2 million annually. The salary that came with the position would finally put me in the same general income bracket as my sisters, though by that point the comparison felt irrelevant to my sense of satisfaction and success. When I called my parents to share the news, their response reflected how completely our family's understanding of my career had evolved over the previous few years. "Maya, this is incredible," my father said, his voice filled with the kind of pride I'd once desperately sought through expensive performances. Regional director is a significant leadership position, and managing a budget that size requires real business acumen and strategic thinking. "We're so proud of how you've built your career," my mother added. "You've proven that you can create financial success while doing work that makes a real difference in people's lives. That's an accomplishment not everyone can claim." Their recognition felt deeply satisfying, not because I'd finally earned their approval, but because it reflected genuine understanding and appreciation for what I'd achieved through hard work, strategic thinking, and dedication to my values. The evening before I started my new position, I sat in my apartment surrounded by books about nonprofit management and community development, preparing for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. As I reviewed my notes and goals for the expanded program, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this point. The expensive car rental that had once seemed so important now felt like a catalyst rather than a mistake. The moment when I'd stopped trying to be someone I wasn't, and started building the life and career I actually wanted. The debt I'd incurred had been painful and stressful, but it had also forced me to develop financial literacy skills that became central to my professional success. More importantly, that evening at Claire's house had taught me the difference between authentic success and performed success, between earning respect through genuine achievement and seeking approval through borrowed luxury. I'd learned that family relationships based on honesty and mutual respect were more satisfying than those based on performance and pretense. As I prepared for bed that night, I felt grateful for the expensive lesson that had ultimately led to real success, genuine family connection, and financial stability built on solid foundations rather than borrowed illusions. The woman who had desperately rented a Tesla to impress her family had evolved into someone who could afford to buy her own luxury car, but no longer felt the need to prove anything through material possessions. Looking back, I could see that the moment Claire had told me there was no parking space for my rental car had been the beginning of discovering who I really was when I stopped trying to be someone else. And that discovery, I now understood, was worth more than any amount of borrowed luxury could ever be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.